article that was written, I think, in the early 2000s called The F Words in Childhood Disability. Sorry, it was 2011, written by Peter Rosenbaum. It was originally written in conjunction or in consideration of children with cerebral palsy, and it's since been expanded to really look to encapsulate all children now that have a childhood disability. So when we talk about body structure and function, what we're looking at is fitness. When we talk about activity, we're looking at the function of the child. We talk about friendships. So that's all about participation. Family is your environmental factors. Fun is your personal factors. And then the other thing that Peter Rosenbaum included was future. And that's not necessarily encapsulated so much in or explicitly talked about in the ICF, but it has the same impact. We're looking at all of those things to be able to move towards a future, and what does a future look like? So what we want to know is, how does this relate to your child's current therapy provision or their connections to their community? Are your therapists working and considering these domains? What's different with the F words rather than the ICF is that the F words are really looking towards being strengths-based. So we really want to work on what is it that your kids are great at? What is it that they want to achieve? Rather than looking at what's wrong, what's the deficit, what can't they do? The language that we use as therapists will influence the language that parents and caregivers use, and the language that they will then go on to use with their children. And this should be the same with neurologists and all of the other specialists as well. It'll directly impact how kids see themselves and the ways in which they then may potentially limit themselves when they're working on language that isn't strengths-based, it's based around limitations. So even before they're dealing with the barriers of their diagnosis from the outset. So when we're talking about increasing fun and participation in physiotherapy, we want to know what your goals are. So this is coming back to that person-centered approach. We want to know what's important to you, what's important to your child. What do they want to do that they're either struggling to do at the moment or that they see that somebody else is doing? And there's some barriers that prevent them from being able to participate as fully as they would like. And we find that that's where you get your biggest hook. You might want your kid to ride, things that we often, or that I often come up with is, so parents are like, I want my kid to ride a bike. And you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink sometimes. Sometimes some kids are just not interested in riding bikes, but it's a parent goal. Find something else that they want to do and they are there. It's just, the change is phenomenal. So it's really about finding out what makes kids tick, what they find motivating, and then you're not dragging them to physiotherapy. They're wanting to go because it's fun and they're learning something, and it's really motivating for them because it has a direct impact on the thing that they're wanting to do. So, for example, I am terrible at going to the gym. I hate going to the gym. I find it boring. It is just tedious because I have to go there and I have to do my own thing. And I'm a physio and I have all the skills, all the tools, absolutely know what I should be doing. I choose to go to boot camp instead because it gets changed up regularly. There's a group of people that keep me accountable, and somebody else is thinking about the instruction, so I don't have to think about it. I turn up, I'm told what to do. And it's the same thing with kids with disabilities. Just because they should go to a physio or a speech or an OT because it's going to have a benefit for them, doesn't mean that they want to go. We know that it's good for them, but so is one glass of wine instead of 2 glasses of wine. It's just because our kids have disabilities, it doesn't mean that they don't get the same choices, or we try and give them as many choices as we feasibly can. So we really want to look at individualised programs for kids with Mito. We want to try and include families, friends, siblings as much as possible, because then it widens that participation and it's not just the focus on that kid. Does it make it more engaging if they bring a friend along? I would find it very difficult to think that there would be any therapist that would be reluctant to have somebody else to help with that motivation. We know that hydrotherapy can be really beneficial for kids with Mito. Most kids really enjoy being at the pool. It's easier to move. The hydrostatic pressure is really nice in terms of being able to ease some of those movements. We want to make sure that we are not increasing fatigue, that we're not increasing pain, and that we're making sure that the kids are motivated and involved. We also know that with exercise, as with the general population, you get an improvement with your mental health as well. And it's the same thing with kids. We know that if there's a difficulty in being able to move, they're not going to get the same exercise recommendations that we have for all people. And the same is expected for our kids with disabilities or kids with Mito. We still want them to have those same opportunities to have that physical activity within their day. So however you get that, be it hydro, down at the park, whatever games it is that you can get them to do or your therapist can help you with, that's where we want them going. So we've discussed what a holistic approach looks like, and we will do a little bit more in terms of once we move beyond your standard physiotherapy and what that looks like. Something that's really interesting for me, I guess, is that there are so many different presentations of Mito. They all have different impacts. They all have different severity. And it's hard to know sometimes what the progression or what it's going to look like in a couple of years' time. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that while Mito is a very specific condition, has a very specific set of consequences or outcomes, as therapists, we will treat the clinical picture that we see in front of us. And so often we come back to the ICF and we come back to our assessment. So what are our impairments? What do we need to work on in order to allow your child to be able to participate? Is it building strength so that their walking is more efficient? Is it looking at their balance so they're not falling over as often, so they don't have to spend as much energy getting up off the floor? And then that fatigue element really comes in. So it's always going to be an individualized approach. One thing that's really important to note is that we do need to be aware of all cardiac implications that can be prevalent in Mito. We would like there to be a GP sign-off or a cardiologist report that gives us the full indication of what's going on before we set up exercise programs for kids with Mito. So when we talk about one of the important things with Mito, and as with all conditions that have a progressive nature or a changing nature, is that we want to do regular reviews. And to parents, it's going to seem like you're doing another assessment. Can we move on with the treatment or the sessions? The reviews are important from a couple of perspectives. It's about being able to provide evidence to the NDIS around where things are at. Where's our baseline? How have things changed? Have there been improvements? What have we seen? And it's a reporting requirement to NDIS that at the end of each plan, we provide evidence to say this is what we've done over the last 12 months or however long your plan has gone for. We do the reviews. I find school holidays are a really good reminder. Kids have had an opportunity to have some rest, to not be in the school environment. We're also not pulling them out of school, so they're missing more school time when we already know that they miss quite a bit of school because of other appointments or illness. So physio can have an impact on fatigue. So looking at weakness, not so much hypotonia, but it can be a consideration. We want to look at exercise intolerance. So again, looking at that weakness. If we can improve exercise tolerance, we look to have an impact on fatigue. We know that being stronger, there may be less muscular pain associated with that fatigue as well. Poor balance and coordination are really fatiguing. So like I said, if you're falling over all the time, you've got to expend all that energy getting up. Or if you're not confident with your walking and you're really stiff when you're walking, you've got all of your muscles all fixed, all doing a lot of effort just to keep yourself up. We want to look at preventing body distortions, and it's a word that I hate, especially when we're looking towards strength focused, but we want to make sure that there's no joint instabilities, joint contractures, or scoliosis because of the impact that it has later on down the track in terms of someone's ability to be able to participate. As physios, we don't directly impact on gastrointestinal disorders, but we do know that with movement, it can ease constipation as well as improved motility throughout the bowel. And then in terms of the diabetes, we look at a lifestyle and health management perspective, and that's where an exercise physiologist can also be of benefit. So we know that the evidence for Mito is that endurance exercise and resistance exercise is really highly valued. And I guess to put it in a really basic term, the fitter you are, the more you can participate or the more you can endure. It's the same with anyone within the community. The impact, however, is greater in Mito. So we've seen that there's significant change over a 12-week program of resistance plus endurance exercise to respiratory muscle, upper and lower limb strength without side effects. So there's a better endurance, better ability to participate without feeling fatigued, an improved ability to recover after exercise, which in real life equates to a better ability to recover from daily tasks. So that fatigue component does become minimized or better tolerated. So coming back to our F words again, it's about fun, fitness, friends, and function, plus our future and the impact on mental health as well. And there's constant research coming out over the last few years around exercise and mental health or physical activity and the impact that it has on someone's mental health and well-being. One thing that's emerging is, and it's very popular at the moment, or it has been over the last few years, is high intensity activity or HIIT. It's not been heavily researched in the Mito population yet, but the evidence is emerging that there should be some good outcomes for that. And it's just about being able to manage what someone's able to achieve on the day. We all know that Mito fluctuates depending on weather, fatigue, nutrition, stress. So that could be schoolwork. So we just need to be able to modify based on what we see in the day. This is kind of where we start talking about the other things of where your allied health team has an impact. This is what I would say is the secondary component of physiotherapy. So we look at 24-hour positioning. So how often are you changing your position throughout the day? You're probably not thinking about it either. So, you know, you've got mobility devices like walkers and wheelchairs, and they're not just about being able to help someone get from A to B. They're also going to be about mitigating fatigue. So, you know, if we have a child at school who at high school has to move between multiple different classrooms, are they better off using a wheelchair just to get in between the classrooms so that they are conserving energy? Is there benefit in using a supportive chair that isn't just a regular school chair so that they don't have to work as hard to hold themselves up in the classroom? So again, looking at how do we encourage that participation within a school or a home environment by that support that we put in place. OTs are much better at physios than looking at supportive or adaptive school equipment. things like making sure that iPads or schoolwork is accessible electronically. Okay, go. Exercise is going to have the biggest impact on your cardiac care. Like I was saying, we want to make sure it's individualized. We don't want too much so that it's increasing fatigue. It's that same thing of balancing fitness. We also look at management of respiratory components. So we want to make sure there's appropriate respiratory support, airway clearance, and maintenance of lung volumes. Again, it comes back to that participation. If we can maintain all of these systems to the best of their ability, it means that future participation, future function isn't impacted by, say, scoliosis then impacting on lung volume, so you can't breathe as deeply, or having a greater risk of a respiratory illness because part of that lung is compacted or has reduced space. This was the prettiest and accessible bathroom that I could find. Again, this is this is more of an OT component, but we are thinking towards, how do we maintain function? Do we maintain people being able to walk so that they can toilet themselves without having to get somebody else involved? And we really just want people involved in the community. We don't want people with disabilities, and especially kids with Mito, existing in a silo. Everyone else gets to exist within their community. We really want that same integration and participation for our kids as well. So looking at things like swimming, cycling can be a really good one. We run a bike group occasionally, and we're also looking at putting together some school holiday gross motor groups that are, I think our most recent one is going to be Olympics based, given that we've got the Olympics coming up. And it's not so much about the outcomes or the achievements, but it's also about providing an environment for kids to be able to participate where they're not going to feel bad about not being as good as their peers, or being able to really succeed in that environment as well. So we really want to set these kids up for success. Things like horse riding is fantastic for balance and coordination. Dancing can be really good in terms of, again, balance, coordination, and fitness when you really do start getting into some more active sorts. And it's so good from a participation perspective. So your physio should be able to help you link in with either local adaptive sporting groups or work on skills, sports-specific skills. They might just need a little bit of a boost that gets them a little bit closer to being a bit more confident in their ability to participate as well. School and work environments, again, managing that participation, advocating for participation, and looking at the fatigue management. Sometimes in schools, we do find that we need to have a discussion around access to the educational curriculum. By law, all children are entitled to be supported to access the school curriculum. Schools will often require support in the initial stages from parents and therapists around child's diagnosis and capabilities. And therapists can support in schools with parent consent around things like behaviour that can be misinterpreted that's due to fatigue, rather than a child being deliberately naughty. We're also looking at inclusive sports activities. How do we get our kids included in PE classes, making sure that they can access the areas that they're going into. We're also seeing more requests from schools around accessible playgrounds, and that component of universal design with the NDIS is getting more traction because there's more funding available for it. There's also a lot of modified equipment, so things like adaptive tricycles, adaptive trikes. There's wheelchairs that are designed to be more robust, so things like hiking, that kind of thing. And then we also there's a group in Kalamunda that do adaptive mountain biking as well. So they're quite good in terms of like really pushing for that participation. Other thoughts, as caregivers, reach out to your networks. These, like the Mito Foundation is really good in terms of being able to provide that support, but make sure that you're also looking after yourselves as well. It's about your participation in your child's life and the family environment as well. Thank you.